Nancy Guthrie was a devoted mother, a steady friend, and an 84-year-old grandmother who had lived quietly in Tucson's Catalina foothills for more than 50 years. She valued privacy. She kept routines. She showed up for church, for friends, for family dinners. Then, in the early hours of February 1st, she vanished. A doorbell camera went dark. A masked figure appeared. Blood was found at her doorstep. What happened inside that short window of time? And how did one piece of evidence found miles away shift the entire investigation? Why did that quiet night spiral into national headlines? The woman behind the headlines. Nancy Guthrie was never meant to be a headline. She was not a celebrity, not a public figure chasing attention, not someone living behind locked gates cut off from the world. She was an 84-year-old mother and grandmother who had spent more than 5 decades rooted in the Catalina foothills outside Tucson. Born Nancy Long in Kentucky, she grew up in a time when ambition for women often had to be quiet and steady. And that is exactly how she built her life: steady, determined, resilient. When her husband died suddenly in 1988, the loss split her world in two. She was left to raise her children through grief while redefining her own path. She stepped into the workforce more fully, carving out a communications career at the University of Arizona. Colleagues remember her as composed and thoughtful, someone who did not seek praise but commanded respect. She advocated for programs she believed in. She gathered support when funding was threatened. She kept pushing forward without spectacle. At home, she extended that same strength outward. She cared for her own mother. She welcomed her brother, who had Down syndrome, into a guest house on her property. Friends describe her as the kind of person who showed up quietly when others were falling apart. She listened. She steadied. She stayed. In recent years, age had brought visible changes. A pacemaker regulated her heart. Daily medication was no longer optional. A cane helped her navigate gravel driveways. Strong hearing aids filled in the gaps that time had carved out. Yet those close to her insist that her mind remain sharp. She followed the news. She read constantly. She wrote in her journal on her patio, with the desert air moving around her. Just days before she disappeared, she was seated at her mahjong table, laughing and playing strategically as always. She celebrated her birthday with close friends, complete with shrimp and grits and fresh beignets. She confirmed plans to watch a church service that Sunday, as she had done so many times before. There was no sign that she felt unsafe, no indication she sensed danger. She was still socially active, still engaged, still present in her routines. Her youngest child, Savannah Guthrie, may be known to millions as a co-anchor of NBC's Today Show, but Nancy never leaned into that spotlight. Neighbors say she valued privacy. Her home was low-slung and warm, set back among cactus and desert brush. It was a place of books, quiet dinners, and long-standing friendships. The thought that this house, this familiar, steady place, would become the focus of a national investigation felt unthinkable. January 31st began as an ordinary winter evening. Dinner with family, a safe drive home, a garage door opening and closing. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, and yet that calm night would quietly mark the final moment of normalcy. No alarms, no warning, just silence after 2 a.m., a phone left behind, medication untouched, blood on tile. The shift from routine to rupture was abrupt. One night separated decades of order from chaos, and the woman who anchored so many lives was suddenly the center of a question no one could answer. What happened in the early hours of February 1st would transform that peaceful home into a crime scene. The night everything changed. January 31st was routine. Nancy had dinner with her daughter Annie and her son-in-law. They spent several hours together at their home. There were no signs of stress or concern. Around 9:48 p.m., she returned to her house in the Catalina foothills. The garage door opened and then closed 2 minutes later. Her son-in-law watched to make sure she entered safely. That was the last confirmed moment anyone saw her. The house appeared normal from the outside. No alarms were triggered at that time. No emergency calls were made. The neighborhood remained quiet. But in the early hours of February 1st, the timeline shifted. At 1:47 a.m., her front door camera was disconnected. About 25 minutes later, a motion sensor on the property was activated, but no usable footage was stored. At 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker stopped communicating with her cell phone. The phone was later found inside the home. That detail suggested she was no longer near it after that time. The sequence of events within that 40-minute window raised immediate concern for investigators. By late morning on February 1st, family members realized something was wrong. Nancy failed to arrive at her friend's home to watch a church service, something she had planned in advance. She was known for being consistent and punctual. Calls and messages went unanswered. Family members went to her home just before noon. They found her car still parked. Her wallet was inside. Her daily medication had not been taken. Her hearing aids were left behind. These were essential items. Given her medical needs, she would not have left without them voluntarily. Investigators also found blood near the front porch. DNA testing later confirmed it belonged to Nancy. The doorbell camera mount was empty. The device had been removed. Sheriff Chris Nanos later said there were signs at the home that indicated force. He described the scene as one that did not sit well. Authorities quickly treated the property as a crime scene and began a formal investigation into a possible abduction. Several days later, officials released doorbell camera images recovered from the property. The footage showed a masked individual outside Nancy's home during the early morning hours. The person wore gloves and carried a backpack. At one point, the individual appeared to block the camera with a gloved hand and attempt to cover it using leaves. The figure's estimated height was between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches, with an average build. The backpack was identified as an Ozark Trail hiker pack. The images were black and white and recorded in low light. The suspect's face was fully covered. The footage did not show the abduction itself, but the timing aligned with when Nancy's pacemaker disconnected from her phone. Investigators stated that from the beginning, they believed she had been taken by force. The combination of blood evidence, missing camera hardware, and the masked figures strengthened that assessment. There was no sign of a struggle heard by neighbors. No witness came forward that morning, just a gap in time that refuses to close. Investigators circled the same minutes again and again. 40 minutes. That was all it took. 40 minutes between ordinary and unthinkable. And inside that narrow span, everything changed. But the video was only the beginning. Soon, strange messages would deepen the mystery. Ransom notes and public pleas. About 24 hours after Nancy was reported missing, the case took another turn. A local television station received a message claiming to be from her kidnapper. The note demanded millions of dollars in Bitcoin in exchange for her release. Soon, other media outlets reported receiving similar communications. The messages were structured and deliberate. They included deadlines. They warned against involving law enforcement. But there was a problem. There was no confirmed proof of life. Authorities reviewed the notes. The family acknowledged hearing about them. Still, they asked for direct contact. They asked for something clear and undeniable that Nancy was alive. As the deadlines listed in those messages passed, nothing changed. No verified follow-up. No release. No confirmation. The uncertainty grew heavier. Investigators did not publicly confirm whether the messages were authentic. They also did not confirm ongoing communication between the family and any suspect. The presence of ransom notes suggested motive. Yet without proof, they also raised doubts. Were they genuine demands? Or were they attempts to exploit a high-profile case? The lack of clarity added pressure to an already urgent investigation. As the public absorbed these reports, Nancy's children stepped forward. Savannah Guthrie and her siblings recorded a video message addressed directly to whoever had their mother. In the first video, Savannah read from a sheet of paper. Her voice was controlled but strained. She asked for proof of life. She stated clearly that voices and images can be manipulated in modern technology. The family needed certainty. They were ready to talk, she said, but only if they knew Nancy was alive. The message was specific and careful. Days later, Another video appeared. This one was shorter. The tone shifted. It was more direct, less scripted. Savannah spoke without reading. She stated that they had received a message and understood it. She urged the person to return their mother. The wording led some observers to believe negotiations may have been attempted. At one point, Savannah confirmed publicly that the family was willing to pay. That statement was significant. It signaled seriousness. It signaled urgency. Each video marked a stage in the emotional progression of the family, from structured demand for proof to open willingness to meet terms. As the search entered its second and third weeks, Savannah released another video. This time she stood alone. There were no siblings beside her, no written script visible. Her message was simple. "It's never too late to do the right thing," she said. She repeated the phrase. There was no mention of money, no reference to deadlines, no demands. Instead, she appealed to conscience. She said her family still had hope. She said they believed in the essential goodness of every human being. The tone was steady, direct, focused. It was not dramatic. It was personal. The shift from ransom discussion to moral appeal suggested either a lack of further communication or a strategic change. Regardless, the public saw a daughter holding firm to hope while facing deep uncertainty. The clock kept moving. Deadlines expired. Silence filled the gaps. No verified response, no confirmed contact, just statements, appeals, and waiting. Each new video carried less negotiation and more resolve. The strategy narrowed. The message sharpened. Hope stayed visible, even as answers remained out of reach, and uncertainty grew heavier by the day. While the family spoke publicly, investigators were quietly chasing thousands of leads behind the scenes. 30,000 leads. Within days of Nancy's disappearance, the scale of the investigation expanded rapidly. Tips began pouring in from across Arizona and from other states. Law enforcement reported receiving more than 30,000 calls, emails, and online submissions. Every piece of information had to be logged. Every claim had to be reviewed. Some tips came from neighbors who noticed unusual vehicles. Others came from viewers who believed they recognized the backpack seen in the surveillance images. Many were vague. Some were clearly unrelated. Still, investigators could not ignore any of them. Hundreds of local deputies, detectives, and FBI personnel were assigned to the case. Analysts sorted digital submissions. Officers conducted follow-up interviews. Phone records were examined. Surveillance footage from nearby properties was collected and reviewed. The sheer volume of incoming information created constant pressure. On one hand, public attention meant more potential leads. On the other, it meant resources were stretched thin, verifying false or duplicate claims. The case was now operating at a national level, and expectations for quick progress were high. As tips were processed, law enforcement moved on several leads near Nancy's home. One residence approximately 2 miles away was searched under a federal warrant. Vehicles from multiple agencies surrounded the property. Neighbors reported officers entering and exiting for hours. A separate incident involved a gray Range Rover in a nearby parking lot. Investigators photographed the vehicle, shielded it from view with a sheet, and later towed it for examination. Individuals connected to those locations were questioned. Some were briefly detained. No arrests were made. Authorities later stated they were leaning away from at least one early person of interest. They also